name is Lee Merritt, Leemerritt. I'm the civil rights attorney for the estate of Steve Perkins. I'm standing with Mrs. Catrela Perkins, the spouse, as you all know, of Steve. And we have just received the news yesterday of the termination and or suspension of officers involved in the brutal murder of Stephen on September 29. The city has impacted the family and the community, and then what is the family-specific plan moving forward to get full accountability and justice for the family. I will say as an initial statement that we are certainly relieved that there has been an administrative action for these officers, but that relief is cautiously optimistic. An administrative action is important when there's a city and policies involved, but there's something much more important involved in this particular case. It's the brutal murder of a citizen, Steve Perkins, a father, a husband, a beloved member of this community. What the decision by the mayor and the city of Decatur tells us is that it wasn't by the book. The policies that were followed were not consistent with best practices throughout the nation, and certainly not consistent with the policies and procedures of the department. And then what that means, on top of being an administrative concern, is that a crime occurred. And we know that the enforcing the law, the providence of the criminal jurisdiction here is with Prosecutor Scott Anderson. And we expect Scott Anderson to get this case before a grand jury as quickly as humanly possible, so that there can be criminal indictments for the officers involved. And so while we are relieved that there have been administrative terminations and suspensions, what this community is waiting for, what Ms. Perkins is waiting for, what the Perkins family is waiting for is criminal accountability as a primary concern. And now we are aware that there exists enough evidence to make an administrative decision despite the significant amount of red tape between officer rights and collective bargaining agreements. And so if there has been enough time in the last over 2 months now since Steve's murder for them to make it a formal administrative decision after going through a very particularized process, then certainly it's time to get this case before a grand jury so that this family can be given the relief and the satisfaction of knowing that these men will also be held criminally accountable. With that said, I'll take some questions, either at me or Ms. Perkins, and I'll stop for a moment. Ms. Perkins, did you have anything specifically that you want to add? Okay.
How important is timing to you at this point? You've mentioned, we're talking 9 weeks since this happened. Knowing that the internal investigation took place, there was material developed there, do you think the grand jury can be called and presented with that information, or do the DA's office still need the AL information?
We believe that there exists enough evidence now and that there's been significant time to prepare a presentation to the grand jury. We understand after speaking with Mr. Anderson that presentation involves the AL's report, and we're waiting for that. However, justice delayed is justice denied. And this family does not want to continue to wait 2 months, 3 months after the murder of their loved ones to know if anyone's going to be held accountable. And so it is procedural justice. The onus is on Mr. Anderson to get this case before the grand jury quickly. He can't skip a step with AL, and AL understands how important it is that they move forward with all deliberate speed. We know that there is a grand jury that's convened now, that in the city of Decatur, that there's a grand jury that meets weekly that has been hearing cases. We want that grand jury that's currently convened to hear these facts. That means there's a timetable on it, and they need to get it before them pretty soon.
Just have a question for you, ma'am. What does justice look from your perspective? What does justice mean?
There's a group that has been meeting, they call themselves the Night Shift, and they have articulated 3 points, which was terminated, prosecuted, and charged. That more or less is a basic formula for what justice looks like for this family. We're on step 1, which is the officers now have been terminated, which is a progressive step. We want to see them criminally charged next, and for indictments to come down And then we want a vigorous prosecution. We want each officer to go to prison for their role in the murder of Steve Perkins. We want the sentence to be fair and equitable according to the law. Steve doesn't get to come back, and so we don't want to see a probation or a slap on the wrist or a transfer of department. We want these men to face significant criminal charges that will send a signal to officers all throughout the region that state-sanctioned violence will not be tolerated.
So what kind of changes are you looking to have with the Decatur Police Department? Do you have any ideas in this regard? Because the mayor was talking about an overhaul of the system.
Absolutely. The Decatur Police Department falls in line with police departments around the country that offers an often overly militarized response to relatively domestic things. There's no way that someone should have been murdered during a repossession of their truck, a false repossession in that regard. But Decatur's police department has too long relied on military-style responses to things that can be handled like neighbors or like citizens. And so we do expect the Decatur PD and the city of Decatur to begin to reimagine public safety, to think about things that will de-escalate situations like this, to reduce the amount of unnecessary arrest or police encounters. That will be the subject of the civil suit that we continue to investigate. So while the criminal case moves forward and the administrative case moves forward, Ms. Perkins has instructed her attorneys to begin looking at the policies and practices of the city and to prepare a federal civil rights lawsuit that will be specifically directed at the failures within the city that claimed Steve's life, but put so many other citizens in danger. And so that is in addition to what we're looking at.
Are there any other, in your opinion, criminally liable persons in this process, maybe beyond the police officers?
That is certainly something that we think should be a part of Mr. Anderson's presentation to the grand jury. We know that law enforcement in this case coordinated with private citizens and private corporations. As we prepare our civil lawsuit, we have identified those private persons and corporations as liable individuals civilly, and we believe that the law criminally lines up with the standard civilly, so that if there is a good basis for civil liability, which we believe there are for other actors in addition to law enforcement, there should be criminal consequences as well. That is something that we continue to share with Mr. Anderson, as well as members of the Department of Justice at the federal level, as they continue to investigate this incident as well.
But it just seems like we don't know when Aliyah is going to come out with its report, and if the city is depending on that, or if the DA is depending on that, how frustrating would that be for you if things don't get done in a fast manner?
It's already frustrating for me and for this family, the amount of delay that goes on in this process. And it's not just because it's an officer-involved shooting. There have been other officer-involved shootings both in Decatur and in other regions in Alabama that have moved forward at a more rapid pace. It's a matter of desire. It's a matter of people who are power brokers doing the right thing and moving with all deliberate speed. So it would be extremely frustrating. I do want to emphasize that although Scott Anderson is waiting for Aaliyah's report in order to present it to the grand jury, it is Mr. Anderson's responsibility to present this case to the grand jury. That agency is just a body that serves that office. I believe it's the Hunt County Prosecutor's Office. That agency is just one body that serves them, but it's on Mr. Anderson to get this case before a grand jury. As a seasoned prosecutor, he understands the importance of getting it in a timely manner before evidence begins to disappear, before you have to seat a new grand jury. And so we will not take the pressure off of him and put it on Aaliyah. Aaliyah has a job, a responsibility, a role in this matter, but justice, criminal accountability, that is the providence of the prosecutor's office.
What stage are you at with the civil lawsuit? Sorry. What stage are you at with the lawsuit that you were speaking about?
Today we received permission from the court to move forward with the lawsuit. We have the lawsuit drafted. We're going to take another spin at it and be prepared to file it as early as next week.
There was some discussion by the chief last night about he and Mayor Bowling speaking to the Perkins family. I don't know that you were present for that. Is there anything you can say about that meeting? Did it help at all? Was it something that you felt like you understood better where they were coming from, or the answers are still out there and you don't have the justice that you want. Can you say anything about that encounter?
I actually cannot because I wasn't there at the meeting.
Do you know who they spoke to then? That was a little ambiguous last night, honestly.
No, we can't say for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to look into. I didn't realize that it happened myself personally. I'm sure Ms. Perkins did it, and we're not sure who was there or who wasn't. She was not.
Given the tenor of what you described, the amount of time that we're talking about between the night Mr. Perkins was killed and the mayor making his announcement yesterday, were you all surprised that there was a ruling that you felt like was favorable from the mayor's office, given the structural impediments that you've seen?
If you're speaking to me, and I noticed
Sure.
you're looking at Ms. Perkins as well, but I wouldn't use the word surprised. I expected administrative accountability here because what was done was so far removed from what I understand is the policy and the law. The delay in reaching that conclusion maybe provided some anxiety for my office and for the family, but ultimately it was frustration it was frustration about the amount of time that it was taking that the family and I and the community have been dealing with.
Catrela, I know a lot of the supporters of your family have been calling for the firing of all officers. Do you know, are a lot of your supporters, are they satisfied with one officer being suspended without pay?
I wouldn't say that they're satisfied, and I'm not satisfied. I mean, because it was 4 officers there, so I feel like they all should have been terminated.
You spoke about wanting the grand jury that's meeting right now to be able to see this case. Can you explicitly tell me why you want the grand jury to see this case?
The only reason I hesitate, as you know, the grand jury is a secret process, and there's certain things that as an attorney I can't speak on, or especially if it seems like I'm trying to influence the grand jury. I want this case to proceed forward as quickly as possible. I do understand from speaking with prosecutors and understanding what's going on in the city that there is a grand jury that is convened right now. I don't believe that's a secret. And because I want this case to move forward in a timely manner, I would like that group to see this case.
I just wanted to check in with Ms. Perkins. I just want to see, if you can share anything about where you are right now, how you're feeling, just with this whole process.
I mean, I can honestly say that I'm still feeling the same. I'm still hurt, still a little disappointed. But I mean, as he said, it is a step, I guess, towards justice. So, but I still feel the same.
We don't know the names of the officers, that's not public, and also the policies that they violated are not public either. Are you, can you wait for the criminal process for that to be more public, or is that something that you would have public at this point?
We want that information right away. I believe it's important to get all the names of the officers, their faces out. The same way if any regular civilian had been accused of a crime, their face makes the evening news so that other people who have had interactions with them can say, I've had a problem with this person before, and they can report it to the proper authorities. A thorough part of doing a full and complete investigation is publicizing the names and charges of these men, and failure to do so is, again, putting your finger on the scales of justice in favor of law enforcement. So it is very important to us that those names be produced. Certainly we want them as a part of our lawsuit, which we discuss filing as early as next week. And there's so much more that the family needs in order to go through this very rigorous process in terms of access to information. And so we do expect those to be released relatively soon. We know that there's some informal documents circulating that list their names, and we're checking on the validity of that information.
Can you characterize your discussions with the DA's office? Do you feel confident that they are seeing this in a light similar to how you're seeing it, or do you not have much visibility about their thinking?
The district attorney's office has offered us as much access as they can at this stage, knowing that there will be motions to change venue, knowing that there are some privacy concerns and information getting out. I cannot say that from meeting with them, that we are any more comforted than we were on September 29, because there's very little information that they can tell us definitively, and some of the things that they hope for, they can only hedge at best, as opposed to definitively state this is what they're going after. And so no, we don't have the greatest confidence in that office now. We're hoping that that will be built up over time. All right.
Sorry, a couple more questions. Is the city of Decatur Police Department going to be included in the federal lawsuit?
Yes. The city of Decatur will be named in the federal lawsuit. The department falls under the city.
And then the specific officers as well, or just the department?
Each officer in their individual and official capacity.
Just the four? Are there any additional ones you're looking at?
So far, well, there's more than just the four in terms of the officers, in terms of the individuals who show up as defendants on the complaint. But it's the four officers, and then there's other parties as well. There's no additional officers to this point as part of the lawsuit.
What has been this ordeal? How big of an impact has it been on your children, ma'am?
It's been a huge impact on them. Like I said, my 7-year-old, she's taking it the hardest because she doesn't fully understand. I mean, it's hard for adults to even wrap their heads around what actually happened. So what she says is, "Mommy, why didn't they just knock at the door?" Or, so if a 7-year-old can think logically like that, why can't adults? But it's definitely torn our family apart completely.
Going back to that night, we've heard that even at the notification level, were you notified when he was killed? What was that process like?
No, I was not notified. My neighbor sent me a text message. I was at work, so that's how I was notified.
So there's just been a big, I know we spoke about this earlier this week, but just a lack of communication from the city on every part. And kind of circling back, you did not know about the meeting that they were saying that they had, given to the family before the information on the disciplinary action was given. That was never relayed to you, correct?
Well, no, I received, a message asking, can I meet with them at a specific time? But I told them that I couldn't meet at that specific time. Could we push it back? But I never heard anything else after that.
There's been another person's name who's, his face is up on the vigil in front of City Hall with Steve Perkins, Jaden DeJarnette, and we know one of those officers involved with his case was also involved with Mr. Perkins' case. Does that speak to the department? Are you familiar with this case? Do you have any comments on that in general?
I have been reached out to by that family and additional families. I don't know enough about the facts surrounding it to speak about it in any informed way. But certainly as the Perkins family pursues justice for Steve, what they're going for is a change in the policies and procedures that led to this outcome and so many other outcomes. And so that case and other cases that happened prior to Steve will be a major part of our lawsuit and what we're dealing with in terms of what we're trying to mitigate ultimately.
What have you been able to learn since your involvement in this case about the Decatur Police Department, policies and practices that may have led to such an unfortunate incident?
I touched on it briefly earlier, and as I mentioned, we're preparing a federal civil rights suit that's going to lay out the policies and procedures that we think are problematic that resulted in this tragedy and other tragedies. But ultimately, Decatur Police Department relies, like I mentioned, so many other cities around the country, they rely too heavily on military tactics for things that don't require a militarized response. Certainly, a citizen who is in dispute with a corporation about a repossession didn't deserve a militarized tactical response in their front lawn.
Can you tell us which policies and procedures you'll be addressing in the lawsuit?
I think I'll save that for a press conference on Monday. I could, but there are a number of averments, and when we start to get into the litigation, we know that there are certain national concerns. For example, qualified immunity was the first one that pops up here. Qualified immunity is a doctrine created by judges 40 years ago or so, that essentially provides a screen for police officers, an additional shield for police officers who use force in ways that we believe are unjustifiable. All they have to do is say the magic words, which is, I feared for my life. And so those policies that we believe broke down here and that exist just within the framework of the deadliest police culture in the modern world are all going to be addressed in the lawsuit. But I think a press conference specifically designed to deal with the structure of the lawsuit might be more appropriate.
Question for you both. Was last night's decision, does that feel like justice?
So we mentioned that there was broadly three things that we considered justice, which was terminations, charges, and prosecution. And so terminations was the low-hanging fruit. It's the easy thing to do. If I murder somebody on my job, the last thing I'm concerned about is whether or not I'm going to be fired. I'm thinking about going to prison. And so, yes, check, that's part of the justice, but it's certainly lacking. We need a lot more to be done. All right. Thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for coming out.